Hey everybody, this is me, Kaylee with the Apartment Queen. You guys already know me. I've got a really cool guest on with us today, Chloe Chohen, and I'm really excited for her to be able to introduce herself. We're going to be going over Airbnbs today and how they cash flow. Go ahead and introduce yourself.
Thanks, Kaylee. Hi, everyone. I'm Chloe. I'm from New York City. I mostly am a real estate investor down in the South and Midwest. I have a background in prop tech. So I run a prop tech company called Brick. So I know a lot about technology. And my main focus in real estate investing is Airbnb. And I'm really excited to share my knowledge with you today and hope that anything I say is inspiring to you and that you can learn something from me.
Yeah, so thank you for sharing that. I really appreciate it. Really what we get to talk about today is the nitty gritty details. So a lot of the times people have an idea, oh, anyone could do Airbnb, and for the most part they can. But there's a few things that come into play when you're running any kind of business. If you want to cash flow and then continue to build your cash flow, especially if you're any of our listeners or watchers, the goal over time is to create passive income and be able to have more free time for whatever it is that you're wanting to pursue in your life. So Airbnb, I've done it before, but I have not been able to scale it. So I'm really excited to learn today a little bit about, I guess, let's start with the pros of Airbnb and how the whole thing works.
Okay, yeah. So, well, the pros for Airbnb, in my opinion, is because you just cash flow, I would say 33 to like 50 to 60% more than you can in almost any other area. So you're able to just move a lot faster than you can in any other area of real estate investing, in my opinion. Obviously, I don't necessarily know everything about every asset class. I've never been in the industrial space or the office space, or actually I've never been even in the multifamily space. So it could be that I am not correct in those areas, but I still have worked with multifamily owners to do complete corporate revenue share takeovers of a building. So in my opinion, I like Airbnb because it allows you the freedom to be creative, but also to really, really, really increase your cash flow more so than in any other avenue. But one thing I do talk about before deciding what avenue and what method you choose to do in real estate investing, I always say is like, take a quick look at your personality. Like, what's your personality like? I personally love hospitality. My next venture is to venture into the boutique hotel space. I love hospitality. I love creating experiences. I love creating memories. For me, the thought that maybe you can conceive your child in one of my hotel rooms is like just super exciting. I just like being part of the memory story. So I love that. And plus, number two, also with location, is what kind of investor are you with your personality? Do you need to be close to your investments, or can you be an out-of-state investor? I personally am okay being an out-of-state investor. I'm a big risk taker. I have my calculations. I trust myself and my intuition. And so I don't mind having a diverse portfolio across the United States, as opposed to some people who want to be in-state. And if they want to be local, does Airbnb work in your city, and is it legal in your city? So that's like two things to do with your personality, whether it's part-time, full-time, if you're okay with necessarily being away from your listings, letting somebody else manage them. And then the third one is like, are you into hospitality? Do you really enjoy that or not? Because if you don't enjoy it, it's going to be a pain in the neck, because, you know, guests are very, it's a very involved process. It's not hands off. It's not, you know, a 300 unit multifamily. You're not dealing with Excel sheets. You're dealing with people.
You got it. So we talked, or so you gave a little bit about a profile of, is this even a good asset class for you to get involved with in the first place? And I think that was a very appropriate segue to get started into talking about, do you even want to listen to this session that we're about to go through? So I guess as far as knowing, okay, I love hospitality. I want to get really creative and get detailed involved with these experiences, think about it monthly. What can we do to improve, something nice? Or for example, can we start using like black towels that say, makeup on them so that we're not ruining the like just little tiny things that, like you said, create an experience. If that's not your thing, then, there's probably other investment classes out there. Now, when it comes to Airbnb, you mentioned a second ago, revenue share. And I've heard the term revenue share, arbitrage, and then I've done an Airbnb myself before. What is arbitrage? What is revenue share? And like, what are the different ways you can do Airbnbs?
Okay, so let's say, for example, you're a landlord, you own a 150 unit building in Austin, Texas. this conversation could still be interesting for you because you might be approached by one of the Silicon Valley startup companies that want to do the revenue share model or the arbitrage model, which we'll dig into right now. And you need to know the pros and cons of whether you want to accept them to do this at your facility, because it really could help you, counteract some costs. Like, let's say, for example, with like 2020, a lot of tenants weren't, let's say, paying rent, but people were still traveling. So if you had a building that was, utilizing half Airbnb model, half long-term lease model, maybe you're able to diversify where your profits are coming from. So let's break down what the two different ways are. Lease arbitrage is you lease the apartment directly from them. So the apartment's $1,000 a month, you bring in $3,000 a month, they get $1,000, you keep $2,000. All the expenses are on you. The washing machine breaks down, it's on you. A cabinet breaks, it's on you, because you're the tenant. And according to the landlord, who may or may not know that you're actually doing this, and obviously being transparent is better, but if that is a straightforward lease arbitrage. You lease an apartment under your name, you take the entire liability and risk on you, you get your own renter's insurance, and there is no other insurance other than what you're taking out onto your apartment as a renter's insurance, because obviously you don't own the building, so you can't take out liability insurance. The second way is a revenue share model where you have the landlord's consent or the owner's consent, and you're working directly with the owner, where you decide, okay, listen, you either have a building that, line C is completely vacant, or, for example, you have a 4-family home that only 2 people are paying rent, or third case scenario, you have a single rental unit that is sitting on the market and it's not getting rented out, but your typical rents are $900 a month. In either case scenario, you go to the owner and you say, this line is vacant, this room is vacant, this house is vacant. Why don't we work together? Let me show you what you can bring in. And so you pull up the numbers, either using, let's say, your DNA, or you can use mashvisor.com, and like either one of them will pull up all the comps and like will show you the data of what everything is renting in. It could pull up the cap rate, what your annual revenue would be like, what even the estimated operational costs are, because it's pretty standardized what the cost will be. And then you can present this to the owner and say, this apartment is going to be able to bring in, $3,000 a month or something of that nature. And if they were getting $1,000, then you can then do a 60-40 split, or you can even do a 50-50 split, depending on the agreement that you're able to negotiate. What's good about this is that if the apartment does not do well, then you both share that risk. So they lose and you lose, but you really don't lose because you didn't even put up capital in the beginning. It's not even your property, so you didn't buy anything. Many times people get the owners to furnish the place, so you don't even have that capital invested in it. So you literally have nothing to lose other than operational cost and time, which is, how do you measure your time, right? So I think that operational revenue share agreements really work also when you're trying to do like a revenue, when you're trying to do a revenue share model for multifamilies, it's really, really good also when you're trying to do corporate subleasing. Because, so for example, in Manhattan, there's a lot of corporate travel. So it's a really great place to be able to say, hey, just dedicate the C line to this because you are 6 blocks away from a hospital. Let's furnish it. And then let's just create this, 33% increase in returns compared to what the rest of the building is bringing in long-term.
So the corporate subleasing, how exactly would that get set up? We kind of covered how the other ones, you either let the owner know, you don't let the owner know. When it comes to corporate subleasing, who does that? Is it like an owner decision? If you had a big building, you're like you said, well, we have 5 units. Let's do a corporate structure where we put it out on multiple different sourcing websites. So it's not just Airbnb anymore, right? Am I right that I'm like home away and you're doing, how does that corporate subleasing work?
So when I was managing over 75 units in New York City, they were not all straight Airbnbs. It was always diverse. Some units were even monthly, advertised on Zillow and StreetEasy, which is the New York City-based Zillow. Some sites were on Furnished Finders, where they're traveling nurses, and I had a lot of connections with HR departments. So the only way to set this up that's different is I guess your business plan, but really the way you approach the owner. So you go to the owner and say, I will be doing a mix of corporate travel versus Airbnb. Now, some landlords would prefer corporate travel because then you have a CEO, or I hosted an intern for, I forgot the name of the company. It was like a big tech company in New York. One of the interns came in from Germany. So I hosted her. It was like it's a very international, very cute experience to be able to do things of that nature. So you work directly with the HR departments. So the only difference in the setup is really where you're marketing the listings and diversifying that across the board, and then how you approach the landlords. So your leases are a little bit different, because on Airbnb, you don't have any leases and you don't have any agreements with them. It's just straight through the Airbnb site. But when you have a corporate, say there's a lease, there's an agreement between you and the tenant and between you and the owner.
Oh, so a two-sided. Interesting. You're just kind of the middle person. Well, speaking of leases, for example, who's in charge of that? So was it a property manager? Is it you? Is it the owner? Is it all three of you guys? How does that work? Getting the legal stuff set up, or structure.
Well, definitely it's you. If you want to do STR, you want to do short-term rentals, you want to do corporate furnished monthly stays, you're the one who has to put it all together. This is your business. So you put together the website, you can have listings on your website, you put together the business plan, you put together the agreements with a lawyer. If you're just starting out and you don't have a lawyer yet, you can use one of my templates. Just hit me up and I'll send it over to you.
Cool.
And you approach the landlords and you convince them that you're capable of doing this, and you show them that you can do it. And then you get lucky and you start with one and you have proof of concept, and then you keep growing. And that's how it starts off.
That is so cool. Seriously. That's
I love it.
So much about the different ways that you can do that, or the different structures. When you are engaging an attorney at some point in time, what kind of an attorney is it? Is it just a real estate attorney?
Yeah, it's a real estate attorney. Some real estate attorneys have more experience with Airbnbs than others, but you just, you ask around. I never Google. I just ask around a couple of my colleagues, my friends. I'm like, who should I use? And then you just find the person that can be helpful.
Perfect. Now, when it comes to managing, kind of segueing into that, I don't know if it's a pro or a con or whatnot. I'm assuming there's a cost associated with that. I have a friend that does it, and I know what she charges, and that compared to, for example, multifamily, what we pay our managers, it's way different, but they include different things. So how does management work? And if you're in state versus out of state, how would that work?
So the only thing with Airbnb is that it's a lot more detail oriented on a daily basis. So somebody really needs to be on top of things. So you need to pay people more. I used to pay a check-in person close to $75. Sometimes they would even charge, they would want to charge me $125 for them to meet the Airbnb guests on the street and bring them into the apartment. Like, that's what they charge. It's crazy. So our costs were just really high in New York. I know that property management companies for Airbnb specifically can take like between 20 to 25%, but they do a lot of stuff. I mean, there's a lot that goes there. So now the number one tip that I say is automate everything. If you don't know how to automate, come talk to me. I do coach about tech automation, and I'm going to be putting it up online so that you can just watch it without bothering me about it. I'm just kidding. You can bother me anytime. But you have to watch it first. And like, I tell you how to use Guesty and all the APIs and Zapier and Trello and how to set it all up. And so everything is automated. All the Airbnb communications are automated. The guest sends you a message, you automatically get a response. Human interaction is very important as well, but you can always have also a VA to help out. So automating as much as you can is the most important thing. And then having your village and your team is also extremely important. So for example, like I utilize like my brokerage team in New York a lot because they're already kind of working with you. And so if you're like, hey, Bobby, can you run uptown and like drop off these keys? Like you don't have to pay for that 1 hour because they went uptown to drop off the keys. Like because they're already getting paid in the grand scheme of the team setting, they're going to be paid so that you don't have to keep paying them per task, because that could get very, very pricey if every time you're like, hey, can you check on the pipe? $100. Hey, can you check on the light? $50. Like it's ridiculous and it can really add up. But there's also a lot of tech that's available. There's obviously the smart locks. There's this system in New York City that basically would work in any large city, even Austin. Basically you can just throw up these little smart locks that you can put your keys into. So it's in every 7-Eleven, and you go there and there's a box in the back by the ATM machine, and you can just scan a code to like release your keys. So I had keys all over Manhattan for all the different apartments. And so if there was even an emergency, I could be like, hey mom, can you quickly go grab a key and like clean up that apartment because the maids forgot to go. So, I mean, that sounds very hectic. And like that only happened really in the beginning of the business when things were very hands-on and kind of small. But automating everything is really, really important. And it's very, very easy to do. There is so much supporting technology now for Airbnb that it's just like, it's almost unbelievable. You can even just have the app communicate with the cleaners directly. So the cleaners have the calendar, that's your calendar, so they know exactly when to clean. You don't even have to communicate with them, say, hey, don't forget to go clean the apartment, because they already know to do it. So the tech automation flow is a very important thing to set up. But once you have that all set up, it's smooth.
That's smart, because what I had to do to figure that out was I would have a day of the week or a time like on an interval that was blocked for them to clean. And so no one would ever stay during that time. But yeah, sometimes people don't stay and they don't need to clean, or yeah, exactly. So that's, if you want to reduce your cost, that's really smart. That's very cool, Chloe. Now, speaking of all these different expenses that can add up, what would you say, especially now that you've gotten it to be probably like a more healthy ratio of like expense, what would be a normal expense ratio running this business? In multifamily, about a 50% expense to profit margin is about normal. When you see a business that's got a really low expense margin, that means they're not spending on advertising. They have a lot of things that they're not doing. So what would you say is a normal expense ratio?
I think that's such a great question. I also think that I'm not great at math, and I actually don't know the answer to
Sure.
that.
Okay, well, then talking about expenses. So, for example, in multifamily, whenever we're looking at what a property manager will cost, it varies depending on the size of the property. So, the larger the property, it seems that the less their expense, less they charge. Because anyway, so point is we can get down to about 3.5% for them to do just the very basic, see the property every week, make sure that we haven't had a fire, just the basic stuff. And I've seen up to 20% in short-term rentals. What's a normal percentage of the income to pay for a property manager?
For the property manager, they're between 20 and 25%. I mean, like my expenses per unit, I would have to do this off the top of my head because I don't have the calculations in front of me. I would say like I try not to spend more than, let's say, 10% of monthly revenue. But it's usually, I almost feel like it's less than that, because other than the cleaning cost, which is built into the Airbnb fee, and then the taxes, which is built into the Airbnb fee, and then the carrying cost of the property itself, which is usually, close to like a third of what you're making, it's not that high. And I know that wasn't very mathematical, but sorry, that's me.
Oh, I'm kind of surprised. That's cool. And then speaking of like the costs also, you talked a little bit earlier about insurance. You talked a little bit earlier about legal. So I want to go into risks, for example. So, whenever one lesson I learned, and this doesn't necessarily need to be a rule of thumb, but someone gave me an idea, that had been doing it longer than me. I had a disaster one time in one of my properties, and it was like criminal activity, and like 3 floors were flooded, and it was just ridiculous. So point is they were like, well, why didn't you just take the deposit up front that was in the amount of what their total stay was, so that if there were damages, you don't have to sit there and then try the insurance and try Airbnb, you just had the money already sitting there. And then if there was nothing that happened, they get the money back. Are there any things like that you'd recommend to reduce, the liability, legal costs of damages, things like that?
Okay, so that's a really, really good question. So having insurance obviously is very important. So you need to have 2 insurances. You need to have renter's insurance, and then you need to have liability insurance for your business. Even if some properties are not necessarily yours, you don't own it, you also have to be able to carry that risk even for the owner. So I would just have those 2 insurances all the time. The next thing that I would say would be, it depends if you're doing a house hack, if you're doing lease arbitrage, if you're doing revenue share, and if you are an owner that owns a multifamily building and you have people doing it there. So now with revenue share, I would say there's the least risk involved, because revenue share, you basically coming in and it's kind of like a concierge service. You're saying, hey, you have a beautiful home and I'm just going to furnish it for you and I'm going to create the experience for you and I'm going to run your Airbnb for you, but basically, and then I get paid a certain amount for it. So it's concierge, right? So they're coming in, they have no real risk, and they will still take insurance out on the property just to, showcase that they're careful, but also they have all the furniture inside. That's their furniture usually. So, there is that insurance that that's not too expensive. It's not more than a couple thousand a year. Even if that, depending on the state and the type of property you have and things of that nature. So now, where is the biggest risk that you have? I mean, it's like when you buy a property and you have a really bad guest. So how do you mitigate this risk? Well, first of all, I never accept any guests that don't have reviews. I don't accept guests that are local. I don't usually allow people to stay for just one night or even 2 nights. Sometimes I make the minimum 5 nights, even though that eliminates a lot of people. It's just one of the things that I do to make sure that I'm getting somebody that is actually coming, can afford to stay, and it's not a local person trying to like come and have a party in my apartment or do some illegal, things in my apartment. Now, taking a security deposit is a very interesting thing. So I did have a case where I had 2 international students come to stay in my place. And for some reason, I got this feeling based on their WhatsApp picture, based on the fact that they communicated with me off Airbnb, I was like, these girls are for sure prostitutes. Like, I was like, hands down, absolutely sure. So I took them through the ringer. I was like, I need to see your passport. I need to see this. I need to see that. And they kept sending me all their documents, and it added up. I did some stalking on Facebook and some other sites, and they probably were prostitutes, but whatever the case is that they checked out in terms of they sent me all of their documents, which obviously I can use against them necessarily because I have that. And so I just made them, I met them at the property. I didn't let them do the standard check-in, and I made them sign a document. And the document was basically just like, it was like this like lease agreement. So basically it held them more liable. I didn't take more money from them, but I just made that because at this point, what's happening is you're scaring off anybody who thinks they're going to get away with anything, right? You're scaring them off. They're not going to necessarily pull that shit with you if they know that you're going to call them out on it. And this is another thing that's actually a huge issue right now, especially in primary markets, evictions, right? So there's an eviction moratorium, and there's a lot of states that are very tenant leaning. Now, not trying to make a political statement about Democratic or Republican, but it really, New York has gone to shit, right? And so basically what's happening now is with the eviction moratorium, a lot of landlords are leaving town. They're no longer interested in providing care and upkeep for their properties, because if you can't increase rents, what's the point for them to do it? I mean, it is a business after all. And what's happening is a lot of guests are coming, booking, and trying to stay longer than the 28 days. So now there's a rule in the hotel industry that nobody is ever allowed to book more than 28 days. If you go right now and try to book more than 28 days, they will not let you stay there. So the reason is because if you book for more than 28 days, you're grandfathered in at the price that you got in at. And so I have a friend in New York who owns a couple of hotels. And at one hotel, he said on the top floor, he has like 3 or 4 tenants there that are there from like the 70s. And he's stuck with them paying like probably pupkas. Who knows? They're probably paying like $30 a day. And they're stuck in the hotel. So the rule is that anybody who stays more than 28 days, because 28 to 30 days is then considered a long-term tenant, and they have the rights that you can evict them. So never let them ever get rent at your Airbnb. I don't really allow more than 28 days stays, although monthly stays seems good because it is like longevity and there's like this consistent premium rent that you're getting. I would take them offline. I would make them sign some documents. I would make them send me their ID and maybe even ask for a security deposit at that point. And if anyone is not willing to comply, and if they don't check out with their references or things of that nature, then you know what? Throw it to the curb. You can't just do Airbnb and look at it like that way. You have to understand the real estate industry in general. And because in 2014, I started out as an agent, I understand that side of things. And you know what I mean? Like I did a couple of different aspects of real estate before I got into Airbnb. So I was able to utilize those documents and things of that nature to like kind of do a credit check on them, look at their background, just to make sure that they check out. But your intuition is going to be a good telltale sign as well. And good reviews are very important. Don't let instant book without that. And those are the best
We
ways.
don't do the auto check-ins. That was what happened that night. I think I was out hiking out in like
Ah.
Texas, and he somehow got past the like 3-strike thing I had set up, and then got into the auto check-in because he had the reviews, he had the passport, whatever. Because some of it was automated, but yeah, I think he was there to commit suicide. So it
Oh
was
my
a
God.
total
Oh
fiasco.
my God, man. Oh, I just got like chills. Oh,
Don't
that
do auto
sucks.
check-in. Yeah, your intuition is spot on. And then I've got 2 more questions real quick. So speaking of auto check-in, in finding the best tenants and the best renters and the best place to do this kind of a business venture in, you kind of mentioned a little bit earlier about a primary market. Some of our listeners may not know what that is, or know how to identify the best places. So for example, if I was going to, okay, I want to do a house, or I want to do a single condo unit, or I want to do whatever your real estate space is that you're going to be using for Airbnb, what would be the best way to research the best markets to do this in? I know in multifamily, we've got like a 5-6 step process for it. But when you're trying to figure out where to go start one of these businesses, in my head right now, I could say, oh, Nashville, Tennessee. That'd be a great place. There's lots of tourists. But like, how would you identify it with
That's
numbers?
such a good question. Okay, so first of all, I just want to say that I did put together like an Airbnb masterclass that is like about 4 or 5 hours long. And it was basically everyone would say, hey, can I take you to lunch and pick your brain? So I made it the price of lunch. It's 36 bucks, very affordable. And I walk you through everything. But what I'm going to tell you exactly what to do now, but in the video, I can like walk you through the back end and how to utilize it. So number one is data, right? So you have to look at data. And so I use AirDNA and Mashvisor. Both of them are really good sites, and they pull the data. Actually, I work in data, as you know. So they pull it actually from this company called Cherry. But what data does is it tells you the investorability score of different locations. So what's the price of the property in order to purchase it, how much they're getting per night, and then what the occupancy rate is. And so you can just go there and hit the button rentalizer, put in the address, and it will pull up all of the comps in the neighborhood, and they will analyze it for you. They'll basically tell you, this is how much revenue you'll probably make annually, this is how much the operating expenses is going to be, this is the occupancy rate, and this is the price per night. And they'll give you the loose cap rate of what it would be like. So then you would have that idea. But another thing I want to venture into, because if you don't get this about me by now, I'm not somebody who does something like just simply because everyone does something. I do it my own way. And that's why I said, pick your method of investing based on your personality. Same thing goes for Airbnb. There are different models that you can implement in the Airbnb vertical, right? And I do want to talk about that a little bit because I know that your audience is mostly multifamily buildings, and there are so many buildings. I think there's even one called Navito in Texas, where basically they take these entire apartment buildings, luxury apartment buildings, and what they do is they break them up into different business models in the same building. So they allow the tenant to have a long-term rental with these turnkey, very modern, built out Airbnb type of apartments. So these people have these annual leases, and they're allowed to travel 188 days a year, where they are then able to sublet on Airbnb. The building management company is the management, takes 25% fee of that. So now this works into the millennial digital nomad kind of era that we're all in right now. Plus, with COVID, there's a lot of travel pods, which is like the new trend of traveling, where everyone just travels in pods, that they trust each other. They know that they're all COVID free. So they're going to these places and sharing these spaces together. And so that's like one of the methods that have been happening a lot. So it's like a membership based apartment living, mixed use. Then there's also pop-up hotels that are using the Airbnb method as well. So it really has disrupted the entire hospitality and the even like co-living, co-working, long-term rentals sort of lifestyle too. So based on the model and based on the markets, what I would say is again, with your personality, are you okay long-term? I mean, are you okay investing out of state, or do you have to be local? So if you're okay with out of state, then hit up your DNA, look at the top markets 2021, pick a market that meets your desirability. Do you want to do a corporate business takeover? Do you want to build out a boutique hotel? Do you want to just have 5 or 6 luxury homes, right? Because you can have a luxury home and make $20,000 a month just with one luxury home. So you have 4 or 5 of them, let's say in Charleston or upstate New York, or, you know, in nicer neighborhoods. And then you're able to really just manage those 5 or 6. You know, there are some, you don't need hundreds and thousands of units to be hitting the $1 million mark. You can have 20 and make that much money. It's just a matter of what model you want to go after. So here would be my step-to-step guide, even though I didn't have these steps built out prior to this conversation. So off the top of my head, I would say decide if you want to be local or out-of-state investor. If it's local, then the next step would be you have to decide what model you want to take over by looking at the data and seeing what is going in your market. So your DNA will tell you if it's mostly single rooms or if it's mostly whole apartments that are renting at that place. If it's single rooms, I can assume you're in a primary market. Primary markets are, I'm not going to list all of them, but it's like New York, LA, San Francisco, a lot of Chicago, right? I mean, Houston?
Dallas, Houston, yep.
Yeah, Dallas, Houston, primary markets. Those places, single rooms work very well because a lot of times people are coming in to visit the hospital or to go to work, and they just are single people, you know, who are just trying to come in, unpack their bags, lift, and then leave, right? So single rooms or that. So that would be if you're local. If you're not local and you're willing to go to any other market, again, you go to the data sources and you see where it's doing extremely well with the business model that you prefer to do. So I right now am looking to venture into the boutique hotel industry because I do love creating experiences. And I like the idea of having all my money all in one place and having a proof of concept and then rebuilding that over and over again in a bunch of different markets, as opposed to having 75 units scattered throughout a city. It just feels scattered to me. So I'd rather have and build a brand around it and then actually build momentum over that. So that's my goal because it's a personal goal. You're basically working off the model. So it's not always the market. It also could be the model that you're looking for that works for you and your personality. Does that answer the question?
Yeah, and that's a really smart analysis of putting units together. It's called Economies of Scale, and that's why I do multifamilies. Exactly. You got one property manager, 250 units, well, one person can handle 100 units at a time. But, point is that you can then make one decision and disseminate, to all of these different units that you own or different properties that are even within the same, area. So I think that's a great idea. And Chloe, one more time, would you remind me on average, what seems to be the percentage profit when you're doing Airbnbs? And it may differ, from arbitrage versus corporate, et cetera. But on average, what do you see?
I would say 33%.
That's pretty good.
That's really good.
33%. So I just wanted to kind of wrap up the end of the interview with that and leave everybody with salivating on that. Because if you're looking at other investments, obviously everything has its pros and its cons. We kind of covered both during the session. But I think at the end of the day, looking at the profit versus the risk, I think are the two biggest things. And then again, like you mentioned, the personality of the investment class. Is it even your thing? Chloe, you mentioned a couple of times that you have a master class, that you have a bunch of resources for investors that are interested in getting into short-term rentals. If anyone is interested in getting involved with those resources or getting in touch with you, how can they do that after this interview?
Oh, thank you. So I'm Real Deals by Chloe is my brand because I try to show the transparent realness behind the deals. So I have a YouTube channel that I try to put weekly tips and tricks of things that I do. And the YouTube channel is called Real Deals by Chloe. I am very active on Instagram, which is also Real Deals by Chloe. My masterclass is on realdealsbychloe.com. And then Clubhouse, I love to drop just nuggets of knowledge that I pick up along the way. It's just so much fun. And so if you follow me on Clubhouse, it's at The Real Deals because there weren't enough letters to be repetitive. And so if you follow me there and you hit the notification button, you will get into the rooms that I'm in. And then you basically can ping me and ask me any questions, which is really cool because it's like a Zoom Q&A, but you get to ask me questions. So you can watch my YouTube videos and then come there and ask me questions. And I always try to answer everything. I love giving back. And again, the masterclass is $36. I think everyone should have the opportunity to know about this. But I do want to make one quick note about COVID, if that's cool, a minute. So COVID scared a lot of people. 2022 was estimated things are going to go back to normal in the traveling and hospitality industry, but things are pivoting, and they're pivoting in our favor actually for the investor, not just for the hotel industry. And so keep in mind that travel pods is a thing, which means that think of each hotel room being its own actual entity. So instead of a hotel room in a row down a hallway sharing common space, each hotel room is its own property, its own house. And if you start thinking of it in that way, the hotel industry is coming back. So it's whatever you got, RVs, tree houses, yurts, anything, lodges, houses, things of that nature. People are traveling in pods. And so if you go and buy a 6-family home, you are going to crush it because people are traveling together, and there's a lot of family reunions, and there's a lot of things that happen in that arena. So I wouldn't have any fear of getting into it now. If you want to start slow, great, start slow. Learn a little bit, make some mistakes, and then you're ready for 2022.
That's awesome. Yeah. Chloe, thank you so much for spending your time with us today and really, really getting into a lot of the nitty gritty details of how Airbnb short-term rentals work. I've learned a lot today. And again, just wanted to thank you. And if anyone wanted to get a hold of you, was it realdealsbychloe.com?
Yes.
Okay.
Or they just go on Instagram and shoot me a DM. I try to be responsive.
Way more hip than I am. Okay. Very cool. Well, thank you everybody for tuning in today and for listening. As always, we're here to bring value and to talk about how you can make yourself some cash flow and some passive income in your life. And I'm glad to be able to have Chloe on today. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you so much. Done recording?